On this Saturday night, returning home to ruins as wildfires rage in California.
And now to see it this way.
The towering flames nowhere near contained, and the Canadians in the crosshairs.
We're not out of this yet. Like, I'm still worried. Like, my suitcase is still packed.
Not running. Another prominent cabinet minister out of the Liberal leadership race as the incoming U.S. president ramps up the rhetoric on claiming Canada. Diagnosis dispute.
I believe that my psychologist is being unfairly targeted.
The doctor under the microscope and the patients pushing back. Plus, not for sale.
Extremely ridiculous.
It's a very special place.
The island nation insisting it's off the market.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Sarah McDonald.
Incredible images from the Palisades fire in Greater Los Angeles overnight as shifting winds helped it grow, prompting fresh evacuation orders in a city that is already on edge. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Firefighters in Southern California have unleashed a full-out aerial assault on multiple raging wildfires today. Crews are scrambling to contain as much of the inferno as possible, as forecasters warn of more challenging weather that could only fan the flames.
We worked so hard to get here, and now to see it this way. I never thought I would live through something like this.
For some, the situation is already as bad as it gets. Their homes in ruins, their lives completely changed. For a fifth straight day, the death toll has also jumped. 13 people now confirmed killed, with 13 others unaccounted for, and those numbers could rise in the coming days. Southern Californians are used to some level of disruption due to fires, but it's becoming increasingly clear that this natural disaster is unprecedented. The victims are only just beginning to grapple with the costs of rebuilding. We'll have more on that in a moment. But we begin tonight once again with our Neetu Garcha, who's in Los Angeles, as that devastation continues to mount. Neetu.
Sarah, here in the Pacific Palisades, the devastation is clear. Entire homes, neighborhoods leveled, and it's striking being here. You look up and it's a beautiful blue sky, an otherwise gorgeous day in Los Angeles, but across the sky, you see these large plumes of smoke from the Palisades wildfire, which spread even further this weekend, leading to more evacuations. Local doctor Joanne Lowe is returning to what's left of her home after the flames that tore through the Palisades forced her out.
What's it like for you to be back right now to see this?
Oh, I'm just really, really glad to come and see it in person. You know, we're just seeing a lot of pictures and just thinking of everything that we left in there.
The toll from this firestorm is becoming increasingly apparent as neighborhoods once filled with life now stand in ruin.
We're all mostly safe, and I just keep pulling that in when I start feeling really terrible. So
time feels frozen for families like hers. A broken clock and charred flag just down the street, reminders that life as they knew it has stopped.
It was like eerie, flame, things with the embers flying around.
This 69-year-old Altadena man returned to save his home Friday night. As firefighters battle persistent flare-ups, we're learning more about the cause of another layer of confusion that's added to the chaos. Officials say the cause of those erroneous evacuation warnings is because of outdated alerts stored in the system. They were sent out to the public when towers came back online after initial outages.
We are very grateful to our federal and state partners who are working with the cell phone providers to make sure that all of these outdated alerts are flushed from the cell phone towers so that this ceases.
Each one of them just sparks new fear, right?
Hilary Yang, a Canadian from BC living in LA with her husband, describes the panic of the false alarms.
I think there's a sense of we're not out of this yet. I'm still worried. My suitcase is still packed, it's a real sense of fear. And then when you get these alerts on your phone and your whole phone goes off, it's this big siren, and your heart just kind of goes.
It underscored some of the incompetence I felt in how this was managed.
On Wednesday, they feared being evacuated when the Sunset Fire threatening the Hollywood Hills came towards their home. Luckily, it was quickly contained.
Looking ahead, you could just see like the entire hillside in our little pocket of view was just red.
The Palisades fire spread overnight, leading the University of California, Los Angeles to shift all classes to remote learning as nearby areas were evacuated. The city remains on edge with a curfew enforced to prevent looting and ensure safety.
Every miraculous story of a rescue or tragedies that we're encountering, the majority are people who did not heed the warning to leave.
The toxic haze has led officials to declare a public health emergency as millions grapple with the poor air quality. As tens of thousands remain without power this weekend, it's hoped that calmer winds will help in the firefight, but those gusts are expected to pick up again early next week. Sarah?
Neetu Garcha in Los Angeles. Thank you, Neetu. Even once the flames die down, it will be a long and costly road to recovery. This natural disaster is already among the most expensive ever, with early estimates suggesting it could end up costing up to $150 billion US. And as Reggie Cicchini explains, the financial futures of so many Californians are now directly tied to insurance.
This barren landscape is yet another reminder of the powerful force of nature that's increasingly more difficult to predict.
This is where I live, or where I lived.
While the U.S. government is promising to spare no expense to assist with the broad recovery, how individual residents move forward is far less certain.
In our very high fire severity zones, getting fire insurance has been really, really difficult.
In recent years, amid increases in wildfires and floods, 7 of California's top 12 insurance agencies dropped, paused, or limited nearly 3 million policies, including hundreds of thousands in L.A.
That forced many consumers onto the California FAIR plan, which is our insurer of last resort.
It's essentially a high-cost, low-coverage plan. Not ideal, but the only option for some. Knowing this could act as a financial barrier, the state's insurance commissioner enacted a law prohibiting companies from not renewing customers. But it's still happening, including to Lynn Levin Guzman's 90-year-old parents.
These insurance people decided to cancel their fire. And we're going through this, and they have no fire insurance.
My primary concern at this very moment is to ensure that wildfire survivors receive the insurance benefits to which they are entitled to.
This insurance crisis is a growing problem in America, where storms are stronger and more frequent. In 2024, damages and economic losses came in at a staggering $600 to $700 billion.
I am very concerned about folks who may be under or uninsured and what the implications of that are going to be.
Insured losses for this firestorm could surpass that of the 2018 Camp Fire, which were record-breaking at the time.
Nothing prepares you for this amount of destruction. There's no manual, there's no book.
Now concerns about insurance coverage are a heavy weight for those left with little more than the shirts on their backs. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Off the heels of the NFL making a $5 million donation to wildfire relief efforts, the National Basketball Association announced it's also contributing $1 million. At the same time, it's also postponed 2 home games tonight for both the LA Clippers and the LA Lakers. The NBA also postponed a game in Georgia between the Atlanta Hawks and Houston Rockets after a winter storm this week swamped the southern U.S. Atlanta's airport saw more than 1,000 flights delayed or canceled since yesterday. One flight carrying 200 people was also forced to evacuate on the runway over an engine issue. Across several states, including Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, multiple cities have recorded more than a year's worth of snowfall in just a few days. Here at home, another senior member of the Liberal Party of Canada is bowing out of the race to replace Justin Trudeau. In a social media message, Transport Minister Anita Anand said she won't run in the next election, much less for the Liberal leadership. Nathaniel Dove explains.
Another Liberal minister bowing out of politics.
The government of Canada did not keep its most basic promise to you.
Anita Anand has handled some of the government's toughest files, addressing sexual assault in the Canadian Armed Forces and securing masks early in the pandemic. But in a statement Saturday, the now Transport Minister announcing she will not be running to become the next Liberal leader, and she's also not seeking re-election to return to teaching. A political expert calls it a loss for the Liberals.
This is just not great news for a party that wants to improve its chances going to the next election. They seem to be losing their most talented, most promising leaders.
I intend to resign.
Though not considered a frontrunner to replace Justin Trudeau, her absence raises further questions about the Liberal Party's future.
And I believe in the future.
Rumors and controversy are swirling around former BC Premier Christy Clark running. In an interview with the CBC, Clark said she never was a member of the Conservative Party when she offered to support Jean Charest against Pierre Poilievre in that leadership race. But the Tories have apparent proof she was, supplying this membership record to Global News. Clark then posted she misspoke and learned her lesson. Speculation also rife about Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney, and Francois-Philippe Champagne trying to become the next Liberal leader to take on Conservative Pierre Poilievre leading in the polls. Clark also said she opposes a federal carbon tax, despite having one when she was premier, but Williams predicts Canadians' focus could shift.
Whereas if their primary concern is affordability, and they see incoming Trump administration as a bigger threat to affordability than the carbon tax, for example, then the election becomes something rather different.
Global News reached out to several of the potential candidates, but did not hear back. The Liberal Party says it will pick its new leader by March 9th. Nathaniel Dove, Global News, Toronto.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump ramped up the rhetoric against Canada this week, threatening to use economic force to get rid of the northern border. It follows an onslaught of trash talk from Trump targeting us, its northern neighbor. Mercedes Stevenson has been following this story closely. Mercedes, how does Ottawa deal with this all?
Sarah, there seems to be no end in sight to the war of words between the incoming U.S. president and the outgoing Canadian prime minister. But what's really behind Donald Trump's very public push to claim Canada as the 51st state? And should we be worried? On the West Block this week, I asked someone who knows the game in Washington very well, former speechwriter for George W. Bush, David Frum.
There's something dangerous brewing, and you need to pay attention to it. So I don't think Donald Trump intends to make Canada a 51st or 51 through 55 state. For one thing, he doesn't want to give Canada all those senators. But does he mean some plan of aggression and hostility to Canada? He pretty obviously does.
Frum warned that the Canadian government should be gathering the best and brightest to figure out how to take on Trump if it turns out that he cannot be mollified with a deal on tariffs, and that the sooner those contingency plans begin, the better. Sarah?
Okay, Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thanks. And you can watch the full interview with George W. Bush's former speechwriter David Frum tomorrow morning on the West Block. The clinical psychologist facing questioning. Coming up, a doctor's fight against her patients' employers. A Winnipeg-based psychologist is being called before Manitoba's provincial regulator in connection to her work with trauma patients. The doctor and her patients say the scrutiny is connected to the Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP employees who she has diagnosed with PTSD. They claim patients are being pressured back to work before they're ready. Here's Melissa Ridgen with a Global News exclusive.
Dr. Solange Levesque has spent her career supporting people working on the front lines of trauma.
The resiliency. They're incredible professionals. They go through, they are exposed to things.
Over 25 years as a clinical psychologist, she's worked with police, military members, doctors, and nurses.
Every day they put on the uniform, they're exposed to things we can't even imagine.
In her role, Levesque forms relationships with patients who regularly share details of what they've experienced with her. Her diagnosis can inform whether the frontline workers need time away from their jobs and what their roles and returns to work will involve when they're ready. In Manitoba, Levesque has diagnosed more than 50 armed forces members and RCMP officers with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. She says her determinations are not always supported by employers. And now she's being called before the Manitoba Psychological Association because of it, she says.
I can't talk about the details at this time, but what I can say is that there has been efforts from certain individuals from health services to communicate with a lot of organizations for the purpose of discrediting me.
For Levesque, this has been brewing for years. In 2017, she went to the RCMP Civilian Complaints and Review Commission with concerns that she was being bullied and undermined for diagnosing officers with PTSD. The Complaints Commission found many of her concerns were legitimate. Her patients, many of whom themselves are seasoned investigators, say it's continuing today.
I believe that my psychologist is being unfairly targeted and even harassed, and being asked to do things that are quite frankly unethical.
We aren't identifying this man because he remains on active duty and says his employer has pressured Levac to change his diagnosis. Global News has seen correspondence that dismisses her clinical assessment of his case and indicates the employer wants him to return to a high-risk, high-stress environment.
If she changed her diagnosis of me, I don't believe I would be sitting here talking to you today.
These military veterans are also patients of Levac and believe she's been targeted.
So there's a shortage of currently serving members of the RCMP and military, and they need those people to keep their jobs.
We're here basically just to get Solange back onto the good books and get her name cleared.
I was hit by a mortar in Afghanistan. I have suffered very traumatic events. So how can I be misdiagnosed?
Levac says she feels RCMP Occupational Health Services, which handles members' health, safety, and fitness for duty, is behind the complaints made to her regulatory board, now putting her license at risk.
It means everybody's at risk. I mean, you get a person who is, even though they're very highly skilled, they're very good and whatnot, they could just lose it.
The RCMP tells Global News the health and safety of employees is a top priority and essential to public safety, and they have zero tolerance for the outdated attitude that mental health injuries are not real.
I just feel that I'm subjected to ongoing retaliation because I'm the whistleblower. But more than that, worse than that, is that you have RCMP members and vets who have been caught in the crossfire.
Levac's hearing begins Monday. She will continue her practice until the regulator makes its ruling. Melissa Ridgen in Winnipeg. Thank you. Ahead, the North Korean soldiers captured in Ukraine and why they were likely not fighting alone. A significant setback today for South Korean investigators who revealed the flight recorders from that deadly Jeju airplane crash last month are missing crucial data. In a statement, South Korea's Ministry of Transport says officials are looking into why the so-called black boxes stopped working in the final 4 minutes of that flight. The flight data and cockpit voice recorder during that time are crucial in determining why the plane crash landed, killing 179 people. Ukraine's wartime leader, President Volodymyr Zelensky, says his forces captured 2 North Korean soldiers fighting for Russia. The 2 soldiers were detained after being wounded during Ukraine's latest offensive in the Kursk region and are being questioned by Ukraine's security service in Kyiv. Ukraine says Russian forces usually execute injured soldiers to erase any evidence of North Korean involvement in the war. We are hearing tonight from the daughter of Dominique Pellicot, the French man sentenced last month to 20 years in jail for disturbing crimes that shocked the world. His daughter, speaking to the BBC, says she will never forgive the man that she used to call dad.
He was always a sexual pervert. Always. There's no way you can wake up a morning saying, okay, I'm going to drug my wife for rape her. He should die in prison. He is dangerous, man. He is dangerous.
Dominique Pellicot drugged and raped his wife Giselle and invited dozens of strangers to do the same. The trial galvanized women in France to demand changes in how sexual-based violence is perceived and dealt with. Next, not on the market. Greenland clarifies once again it's not up for grabs. Greenland is a part of the world that we generally don't hear a lot about in the way of headlines. But the autonomous territory ruled by the Kingdom of Denmark is back on the international radar, whether it likes it or not, and all because of Donald Trump. Vincent McAviney explains.
It's a very special place. It needs security for itself, but it also needs security very much for the world.
This room of Greenlanders received a special call from President-elect Trump during his son Donald Jr.'s visit this week. They seemed happy to wear the MAGA hats he brought, but not all their fellow countrymen are convinced. It can't be bought. And military power? No, that won't work. I think he is too loud. You can't count on us being taken over by force. Denmark doesn't matter a lot to me. It's just a small country. Our partner should be a great power because Greenland is very wealthy. The president-elect could exploit historic tensions with Denmark, of which Greenland is an autonomous territory. Some Greenlanders want more independence and control over how they manage their natural resources. The United States has attempted to purchase Greenland several times since the 19th century. Though Donald Trump suggested a deal in his first term, analysts believe his seriousness this time may be due to US tech companies' interest in mining the abundant raw minerals climate change is unlocking from the ice. But 3,000 miles away in the Danish capital Copenhagen, there's bemusement at Trump's threat to invade a fellow NATO member's territory.
I don't understand what he is doing, quite honestly.
Extremely ridiculous. Like, if he wanted something from Greenland, or we have an alliance.
While there's ongoing debate about greater independence for Greenland, its leadership and Denmark's Prime Minister are in unison, reiterating that the island is not for sale and never will be. Fellow European leaders have also warned against military action, which would be seen as hostility towards the EU. With Donald Trump's inauguration only a week away, we'll soon see how serious he is about expanding America's borders. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Sarah McDonald. Tonight's Your Canada is Ottawa's Rideau Canal Skateway, which opened a section to skaters for the first time this winter. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us once again tomorrow. Have a great night.